5 bodies found oozing life in the back alleys of Paridon. We shall call them by name. Victim 1, Beatrice Bump. Victim 2, Ann Smitters. Victim 3, Sandra Bartello. 4, Mariel Rigsby. And 5, Charolette O'Doul. All lives ended by the same weapon, a cursed blade with an unquenchable thirst for the very fluid of life. A blade so dangerous it can cause its wielder's mind to descend into madness if its bloodlust is not satiated. But why these victims? Why now? And what powers can it bestow that would make the very risk of madness worth it? Well, I've locked the shutters, lit the oil lamps, and retrieved my favorite top hat. So join me as I traverse the cobblestone streets of Paridon in search of the Fang of the Nosferatu. Fair warning, tonight's tale will deal specifically with the history and story of the object at hand. But regarding Paridon, I will not be going into details on the domain. I know, tragic. But I've been taught you cannot go through the mist alone. So, to help me help you learn all that you can about the setting and that houses this instrument of death, I've enlisted the help of my friend Gabriel Jansen at Hour of the Raven. He has released a companion video to this one where he will tell all you will ever need to know about this shadowy stand-in for Victorian London and the adventure that was specifically made for it, the Hour of the Knife. That video is out now, so as soon as you have gotten what you need from me, go spend some time with him. You won't regret it. But while you're here, let's get dangerous. A blade. Sharp, quiet, elegant. For centuries, when you have wanted to get the job done and done right, you picked a weapon of stealth. Guns for show, knives for a pro. So, it would seem, was the mindset behind the wielder of the subject of tonight's tale, the Fang of the Nosferatu. Made from hardened steel, covered in ruby-stained etched symbols, those who looked upon the blade would swear the etchings were written in blood. A vampire's face is emblazoned on the front of the guard, its eyes likewise red with the taint of crushed gems, or maybe something a little more sinister. Scholars question whether or not the blade has retained a consistent appearance, or if at some point someone like Ulrich von Karkov would have looked upon a very different representation of the weapon when it was in his possession. But we will come back to its sordid history, so don't go anywhere. Right now, why these 5 people? Did the victim stop there? To answer that, we will have to illuminate the secrets of the knife's powers. Throughout its history, it has gone through some changes. But no matter who has held it or when, the Fang has always conferred the ability to shape change upon its user. Whenever he or she wishes, they may assume the form of a bat or a wolf, just like the vampire would. When doing so, the blade will merge with the user's body, disappearing into the flesh of the transformed, while the rest of their clothes just fall to the floor, right there where they were standing. There is no limitation on the amount of times that this may be performed. As long as the wielder holds the knife, the transformations may take place. As a weapon, this ornate horror cuts like a magical dagger, causing double the damage of a normal dagger. But that makes sense, since this is no normal dagger. By far, the greatest draw to this weapon's power lies in the ability to confer 13 years of immortality to its master. A siren song that most cannot resist. From the first time you hold the Fang, an evil voice seeming to come from within the blade itself will whisper its desires to you. It has a price for conveying the ultimate upper hand of everlasting life to you, and that price is high. Most who attempt to pay it do so at the cost of their sanity. Rapidly, they will fall into madness. it would be simple to say that the knife requires blood. That's true enough. The blade does require the absorption of blood at least once per day. Any living creature will do, but it must be intelligent. That's important, because what's more important to it than the blood is what it really craves. Something that only an intelligent creature can provide. Terror. Fear. Emotions. See, the Nosferatu actually acts as a conduit for the victim's emotions, drawing out its pain and terror and siphoning it into the mind of the wielder. There are only two ways to avoid descending into madness upon its use. One is to wear a glove made of the skin of a shape-changing creature, or, as in the case of our murderer, be addicted to the feeling of pain and suffering. In relation to the former, if someone does take a life with the knife while protected with a glove, it is not that person who will receive the flood of the emotions. It is the first person to touch the hilt with a bare hand that will experience all the trauma. And more still, while holding stored trauma, the blade may not be used to take a life. But why 5? By now you're probably wondering how all this ties into our victims. Or more plausibly, you already know and are just waiting for me to get on with it. Respect. You see, in order for the wielder to receive the 13 years of immortality, he must take 6 lives, all at the stroke of midnight, on consecutive nights, absorbing all that pain and raw emotion, passing every test against the loss of his sanity. Only then will the gift be his. And this time, the holder of the Fang has been betrayed. A creature attempts to steal a gift that does not belong to him. A trusted servant has betrayed his master and taken 5 souls of his own. No longer content to hold the knife in the glove, the gauntlet has been removed, and now he has a hunger for the pain. Sir Edmund Bloodsworth has lived up to his name and taken out 5 of the 6 souls necessary to unseat Soto as the Dark Lord of Zarisha and claim his 13 years of immortality. But this is where we are. Let's find out where we were. Soto, the Dark Lord of Zarisha, was said to have asked a wizard to provide him with a magical dagger. This item was to help aid him with the symptoms of his transformation into a Dark Lord. Now, some would say that means the wizard constructed this item for him, but I don't believe that's the case. Although the timeline gets a little wibbly-wobbly as to when Soto acquired the Fang, the history of it actually goes back to another Dark Lord, one who rules the forest-covered domain of Valakan, one whose name we have already mentioned today, Baron Ulrich von Karkov, the Dark Lord who takes a new bride every cycle only to have her stricken with white fever, leaving a husk, fading away into nothingness, a cruel ruler, often slaughtering entire villages if he deems it necessary. This man was also a clever tactician, and as such, of course, he would have trusted servants. One such servant was Mortal the Assassin. Under the employ of von Karkov, he would actually assemble a team of his own, dozens of men whose loyalty was without question. Ulrich would entrust a weapon to Mortal, something that we at this point are all too familiar with, the Fang of the Nosferatu. How exactly he managed to come upon it are details that are lost to time. But it was his now, and we don't know for sure even if he was aware of its ability to convey immortality, or how the uses actually affected the assassin. But this we do know. One night while out on a hunt, Mortal and his men came across a trapper named Hugo. Hugo was settling down after an evening of setting his snares and his trap lines. A fire raged as Hugo shared a laugh with his compatriots. From the cover of a hunting blind, a twang was heard. A bolt fired from the crossbow of an assassin penetrated the head of Hugo mid-cackle. His body died, but his soul remained, trapped forever in that laugh, unable to process the truth about his new existence. It wasn't until all his friends were slaughtered, and he looked down upon his lifeless body that he was able to understand, but not accept. It was that night that Hugo swore revenge on Mortal. One by one, the creature that would soon be known as the Laughing Man of Valakan would end the lives of every man in that hunting party. the party that laid waste to his partners and ended their reverie, all except for Mortal himself. No, Mortal's fate would be much worse. Von Kharkov, seeing the slaughter of his men as a personal affront to him, would blame Mortal for all the losses. The Baron would lock him in the tower and take back from him the Fang of the Nosferatu. The blade, having been bonded to him, would require that it drew blood of an intelligent creature at least once daily, like we discussed. But what I left out is that if not, it would take the life force from the person it's bonded with away instead, slowly draining a hit point a day away if no blood was spilled on the blade. The Baron would sit the dagger right outside of Mortal's cell, mocking him just out of his reach, watching it drain the life out of him slowly. But if that wasn't bad enough, once a year Kharkov would slay an animal, restoring all but one of Mortal's hit points, starting the cycle all over again. At this rate, it would be decades before Mortal would succumb to the will of the Fang. All the while, the Laughing Man of Valakan would be just outside of his cell, laughing and waiting for his release. Many years later, Mortal would be granted the release of death, but not his curse. Because now, even as a ghost, he found that he still possessed the dagger, and there wasn't anything he could do to put it down. For many years, there would be tales of a man who roamed the Valkani countryside trying to rid himself of a cursed blade. But every time he would get close, the Laughing Man, who was always nearby, would scare off anyone foolish enough to take the blade from him. Now, from the dead hands of Mortal to the shifting skin of Soto, I can't give you a good answer of how it got there. But it did. And that's Ravenloft. That's what makes it so unsettling. Logic doesn't matter. It's just the will of the dark powers that does. And now that Bloodsworth has the dagger, and 5 out of the 6 souls that he needs to claim, you want to know more about that story, more about Paridon, and more about the Hour of the Knife, don't you? Well, I know where you can go find it. I have hung up my top hat. I've extinguished the oil lamps, and you know I double locked the shutters. So thank you all for being here. You mean a lot to me. Don't get lost in the mist. But more importantly, if you're ever going to go grab the cursed blade, make sure you wear a Jimmy hat. Because the Fang of the Nosferatu, it don't give a fuck.